So the triads are the first, third, and fifth note of the scales, whatever scale you're dealing with. Now, the first, third, and fifth note are the notes of a scale that, when played together, form the most basic chord that you can have.
Okay.
So the chords come from the scale. Well, basically everything does, really, I guess you could say. But so if I have a major scale, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1, right? And I take that first, third, and fifth and play them together, I have a major chord or a major triad. Now, if I start adding notes to that chord using other notes of the scale, then it's no longer a triad. It's a whatever other type of chord it might be. But the triad is just the 1, 3, and 5 of the scale, the most basic chord you can have. And you have to have 3 notes to make a chord. 3 different notes.
Okay.
Otherwise, it's something called a double stop.
Okay.
All right. But now there are 4 main types of triads or basic chords. There's the major. Now, we haven't got into the modes and the other part of the scales here, so we're kind of getting a little advanced on chords, passing our scale knowledge here. So if all this doesn't really make sense on why it is what it is, don't worry about it. We'll get to it. Just kind of know that it is what it is for now.
Okay.
All right. So the first one, 1, 3, 5, coming from the major scale. All right. From a minor scale, what happens is that third degree in a minor scale goes down a half step.
So it's still the same. So if I'm in a C major scale, it'd be 1, 2, 3. So it's still 1, 3, but to make it minor, it would be 1.
And we call that flat 3. We can't call it 3 anymore because remember those numbers are the constant. Well, the major scale is the constant that doesn't change, and everything comes from that. So 3 is 3 because that note is 2 whole steps up from 1, right?
Right.
So if we change that distance, then it's not 3 anymore. We have to call it something else to let everybody know that we're talking about something different. All right. So we call that flat 3. Flat means to lower a half step.
Okay.
In other words, if I'm on this note and I flat it, I go down 1 fret. That's a half step distance.
Okay.
If I do the opposite and go up, I sharp it. So this would be F, F flat, F, F sharp.
Okay.
Or 3, flat 3, or 3, and then up a half step is 4, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if I have a flat 3, in other words, that third note of the scale is a whole step plus a half step distance from 1, it's going to be a minor scale. So the third degree determines major or minor.
So that makes it the minor.
Right.
Okay.
The 3 is a deal breaker for that. So if it's 2 whole steps up from 1, it's major. If it's a whole step and a half step, it's a minor. So in terms of what you just played, if it's there, it's major. If it's there, it's minor. All right, so
is it always determined by the third?
Yeah, major and minor is determined by the third. So if I have 1, 3, 5 for major, 1, flat 3, 5 for minor. Now there's something called a diminished triad. Now the diminished is a tension sound, all right? And what happens in a diminished is we lower the 3 because it's a minor bass. Diminished is a minor bass scale, so it has a flat 3. But what makes it diminished is we lower the 5 2 a half steps. So we have that sound.
So if you lower the third and the fifth, it's a diminished
triad.
Okay, and if you lower the third, it's a minor triad.
Right. Now diminished is a tension sound. Remember the old movies with the piano player where Snidely Whiplash tied what's her name to the railroad tracks?
You're right.
And there's a train coming down the tracks, it's getting closer and closer, and you hear an old piano in the background going.
Yeah.
Right? That's diminished.
All right.
It's like an oh crap sound, something bad's going to happen.
Okay.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that's 1, flat 3, flat 5. Now the last one is a major bass chord. It has the 1 and the 3, but we raise the 5, and it's called an augmented triad. 1, 3, sharp 5. So our basic chord sounds are major, minor, diminished, and augmented. Now, a bass line has three responsibilities. And in order of importance, groove and feel is the most important thing with a bass line.
Okay.
The second most important thing is rhythm. The third most important thing is notes. So it has a function that's broken down into three elements that have to work together in certain ways for the bass line to be good. All right, now let's look at the note job of a bass line. That's to outline the chord sound using one note at a time. That's what the note job of a bass line is supposed to do. Whereas the guitar player will go... the bass player will go... 1, 3, 5, and then I'm adding some other notes to fill it out, but it's still based off that. I'm telling the listener with this bass line that this is a major chord of some kind by using that 1, 3, and 5. So all bass lines have to encompass notes of the triad to be a bass line, because the note job of a bass line is to outline the chord sound. The most basic chord sound is the triad.
When you play that line, do you play the first, third, fifth first before you add notes?
It doesn't matter. It can be different combinations.
Doesn't make any difference.
Well, it does. It depends on what you're playing and the style, and a lot of things go into it. But
Okay.
it doesn't necessarily have to be 1, then the 3, and then the 5.
Okay.
Sometimes I can do it, and if I have even if I'm just playing the 1 without the 3 and the 5, it still qualifies, because as long as you're using the root, and at least the root, the 1 has to be there in some way, shape, or form. And then the 3 and the 5 are kind of like the next most important ones you add on. I add the 3 to tell somebody I'm playing a major or minor chord. I add the 5 to just kind of stabilize the sound and give myself some bridge notes. But, for example, on a rock line, like if I were just going 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, that qualifies as a bass line because it is part of the triad, the root note. The root note can be by itself. The 3s and 5s generally can't.
Okay.
All right? But I could also have a bass line with just a 1 and the 5. Like that sitting on the dock of the bass song, right?
Yeah. So as long as the 1's there, then you always have to have a 1 off.
Yeah, 9 times out of 10. Now, for every rule, the only absolute in music is there are no absolutes. There's always going to be an exception somewhere. But
Right.
generally speaking, yeah.
Okay.
99.9% of the time, yeah.
Okay. Let's see.
All right? So the note job of a bass line is to outline the chord sound. The most basic chord and most important notes for that purpose are going to be the triad.
Okay.
So knowing where the triad notes are outside of remember we're doing those scale patterns, we're doing them the 4 ways, right? With the triad being part of one of those 4.
Right. Mm-hmm.
You got to know where those notes are.